Okay, and now I am going to mute everyone else. We will open up the, unmute everybody at the end. So if there are any questions, and in the meantime, if you have any questions of Paul, please use the chat box and I'll relay them to Paul. I'll keep an eye on that. So I'm muting everybody else. And now I'm going to pass the pass the present role to Paul. And Paul, if you will accept it. Oh. Paul, are you still seeing my screen?
I am, yeah.
Okay. And when I presented when I passed the presenter role to you, did anything pop up on your screen?
Now it's yeah, now I might be able to use my mic and stuff. It seems to be a little normal now.
Okay.
So we'll okay, now I got like the full-on meal deal here.
Okay. So I'm going to pass the presenter role to you.
There we go.
Okay, terrific. Hang up the phone.
Okay, give me a sec.
Paul, would you? Well, all right. Yay.
Oh,
we're cooking
beautiful.
with gas. Yeah.
I don't want to go to the last page right now.
Okay. I'd like to introduce Paul. I've known Paul since 1983. Paul was makes you very old, makes you very young.
Yeah, I think you want to add 10 years to that.
93. Oh, 93. Okay. Paul was in the group that Tom Coulterman and I were working with at the first ever Trillium Curling Camp in 1993. And it's been nothing but onward and upward for Paul. Despite him being part of our group, he's had great success. So Paul is a national development coach, and he's part of the coaching staff, a team leader and a development coach who goes with the Olympic teams. He's been part of that for the past 4 Olympics. Is that correct, Paul? At least 4 Olympics?
Yep, that's true.
Yeah. He's also part of the staff who guide the Canadian teams through world championships, and he's been doing that for a very long time, mostly with the men, but he did do mixed doubles at one time. Are you still a part of the Coaching Association Board of Directors?
I'm not anymore. No, I had to give that up. So no, that was a 3-year stint, and now I'm done my position there.
Your obligation there. Good. Well, you were part of that. That's great. You've been coaching since you were 16. And in addition to the national development coach and national team leader roles, he's also a curling director with the Glencoe Curling Club in Calgary and a high performance coach from Alberta. So I don't think anybody can argue that you're more than qualified and an expert in the field. So thank you very much for agreeing to do this with us tonight, Paul, and I'm just going to let you take it away.
Perfect. My pleasure, guys, and thanks for Curl Ontario and OCC for setting this up. We talk about this a lot and wanting to make this national. And I know there's some people from other provinces and stuff that have taken these, but I'm really pleased to help out. So the topic that Andrea asked me to present on tonight was deliberate practice. And deliberate practice is sort of in the news and sort of a key thing here. I'm trying to change. There we go. Now, getting into this, I forgot that we had this chat room, so forget that my cell number is there. You can write it down if you want, and only use it in case of emergencies. And then my email's there for sure. So any questions and stuff that you have, feel free to email me. I'm happy to help coaches out across Canada when they're looking for practice ideas. A lot of times we'll just get video sent from from all stages of coaches that I've seen in courses and so on, just when they're kind of bumper stumped, to get some help with some athletes. And I love doing that. So just a bit about me. Andrew gave me a brief bio there, but I'm a teacher by trade and taught high school in Peterborough, Ontario, and then came out to Calgary to do my level 4 coaching in 2004 and haven't left. So I've been lucky enough to be part of our coaching staff for the last 4 Olympics and have numerous amazing experiences through that and through the World Championships. So 16 World Championships and hopefully counting. And then plans now this year for the World Men's in Lethbridge, and then I'll be our team leader at the last leg of the World Cup in Beijing in May, which is a cool new contest or competition for us, mainly because of the next Olympics are in Beijing. So we're tying on some Olympic meetings and stuff while I'm in Beijing for that event. So it's really important for me to, as we're going on here, if you have questions and stuff, please use the chat thing or just speak up and jump in. So I remember I taught high school for 5 years, so I'm totally understand being interrupted. I also have 4 kids at home, so having an actual sentence or two that isn't interrupted is new to me. So if you can give me a sense as I go on here about who you are, who you're coaching, what questions you're hoping to get out of. Using the chat thing from my memory last time works really well. Or you can just speak up now if you want to, especially there's Sherry Madaw. So if you can give me an idea of your team, I think what that does, I know when we're in a regular meeting, what that does is give us some common ground to help answer some questions, and sometimes the same concerns you have or questions you have, other people are having them, and that can get us. So if anyone wants to pipe up and say who you are and who you're coaching and what questions you might have, we can get started.
Let's start down the list. So let's start with Jeff. Jeff, do you want to give us a brief rundown?
I coach a U18 team right now, and we're getting ready for regionals. So
perfect. Marianne?
I coach women who are 50 and older.
Ooh, that's good. Nice.
I love this.
Yeah. Rob?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. I coach a junior girls U18 team.
Excellent. Taylor? Okay, Taylor's going to use the chat box, I think. Sherry?
I'm coaching a U18 girls team right now, and we're heading into regionals as well.
Yay. Perfect. And Dave?
U18 boys team, been coaching for the last few years. They keep getting better, and so hoping my coaching skills can keep up.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Okay. I'm going to mute everybody now so that we eliminate some of the background noise.
Okay, so deliberate practice. If you're a reader in the crowd or have taken some coaching under education, Anders Ericsson's quoted numerous times. So Malcolm Gladwell based his 10,000 hour rule on Anders' research. Improperly, Anders will say nowadays, and his whole thing is practice isn't enough. So what we need to ensure and is that we're just not sending athletes out there to throw rocks, and we can apply this to curling, because that is honestly my biggest pet peeve is coming out to the club and seeing athletes, teams, even just regular club members who are hoping to get better out there throwing rocks. So what we need to ensure is that they are engaging in deliberate practice. So for a common understanding about what that is, there's some stuff we pulled off out of his book is that understanding that you're stamping outside your comfort zone. So I've underlined a couple of things I love the fact we have U18 athletes. So we have a big, because honestly, this is that age and stage that we can really impact going forward. And I think we need to ensure that we're getting them, trying to get into my chat group here. That is not what I wanted. Getting them to understand what practice should be and not just doing the stuff they're really good at. So while repeating a skill you've already mastered might be satisfying, it's not enough to help get you better. So we can't ignore the stuff we're good at, but we need to focus on the stuff we're not good at. Moreover, simply wanting to improve is enough. People also need a well-defined goals. And that's where we come in as a role of the coach. And I love the fact that we have a whole bunch of coaches on here because that's where I get my love of the game. So I've got a quote from Michael Jordan in the corner there you've probably seen before. And this video was taken today at my club, so it was perfect timing. And I'll leave this athlete unnamed, but a over 50-year-old curler at the club, based out of the Glencoe Club in Calgary, who's won multiple club championships, has his name almost on every banner, and this is his practice. So again, he's not. My pet peeve is he's moving forward here. He's getting a lot of feedback for himself. He's really good, but there's not defined feedback about A, whether he's hit the brush, B, whether he's thrown a time that he's looking at or was trying to throw, C, that the rock is traveling in a path, in a manner that he's tried to. Our ice, as you can see, they're curled a fair bit, so we're usually into the 12-foot for curl to get to the button, and then between sort of 14 to 15 and a half to get to the tee line. And again, this is going to give him some feedback, but it goes right to Jordan's quote there. Without getting some objective information from practice, this athlete's not going to get a lot out of it. And I know when the coach is on the ice, we usually have drills and so on that they can look forward to. My concern a lot of time with this deliberate practice is not just the team stuff, but the individual practices that these athletes are doing and the impact that we need to have on them to ensure that they're getting objective data from their practice. This is not what we want to, one second. So the plan, and that's a tough thing. I help coach ringette and hockey this year as well. And I get it that you all have full-time jobs. And I need to get into the chat group here because I see, there we go. But there's some questions.
Taylor just mentioned that he's coaching a varsity women.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so this might be easier if I use it this way. Then when I was in full PowerPoint there, I couldn't get into the chat room.
Okay.
So this is good. Okay, I'll use it this way. So plan. So what are we talking? And I love Allen Iverson's quote about practice all the time. So if you ever watched it, it's hilarious. About 3 minutes. Quote from him in a media scrum about practice and the fact that he just doesn't like it and doesn't think it's important. But then the practice plan comes in the coach, and this doesn't have to be rocket science for us. What it needs to be is just set up, and I love repetition. So a lot of my athletes, they should get bored, but I think if we get them understanding why we're doing certain drills, they'll get it. And I honestly, I've had some great video on the last couple of days from a couple practices with Team Cooey just to show you what we're trying to do with those guys. So Team Cooey, just like the U18 regional teams, those teams that you're getting ready for competition. So Cooey's got the skins game this weekend, and then they're going straight into provincials. So time of year is key, but it doesn't change the drills and stuff that we start with. It changes a little bit. We're a little less on basic mechanics and a little more at the end of practice of making shots. So if I had the video of the whole practice, you'd see that a little bit. But there's always objective information trying to get back out of the practice. So my personal belief, and it's right there in front of you, is basics always begin practice. So line delivery, then we go into release and rock path and weight control timed in with that. So you always see me out there, whether we have digital timer set up, but I'll always have a hog-to-hog time. I'm hoping that they're also working too. Feed forward is something you're going to hear me say a lot in practice. And what we try to do for drills, like I've identified there, is have the lead always start. So when you see the next couple of drills, Team Cooey with 3 of those guys, so Ben, Colton, and Kevin in Calgary, Ben's always going to start every drill. And if the ice is slightly different, or it might be curly, it might be straighter, it might be a little more curly or speed-wise, he's hopefully, if I've done my job right and hammering it into their heads, going to feed that forward to Colton. And one of the lines we always live and die by there is every shot is just simply another chance to make the next shot better. And we need to build that into practice, and we need to build that communication into practice. So I don't want it to be a magic light switch that they just turn on for the game, that they start talking about pass and speed and release. So that's something that I listen to. And if I have another coach there, a lot of times you'll see me standing down by the players, listening to what they're talking about, and then hammering it into their structure that they need to be talking about those things. And then they can still have fun. Like you'll notice in some of the videos and stuff, if the audio comes out, I apologize if Ben swears but it's still fun, but we're also watching and learning about how we threw a rock. The challenge too, and I would make sure that your drills is create an opportunity where the player receives objective information. Objective is not my opinion, right? So objective is how we use the cones. It's how we use what we call the flapper. It's getting those hog-to-hog times. If video analysis is there, it's the best objective information we can get when we have the laser set up with video. But prior to using these drills, we have to have a collective understanding of what we're trying to achieve. And that is mainly coming down to times are easy, right? So if we're trying to throw things to the top of the house, and that means 14.5 to 15 seconds, rock path gets a little bit trickier. So talking to athletes about the ice conditions, release mechanisms, and how they want that rock to travel. And then line of delivery is a really easy one, right? So we're simply trying to slide on a straight path. At the start of the year, I'll use more video and video analysis with them than I will at this point in the year, unless an athlete is really having trouble. And then we go there. And what that does is it speeds up that understanding of information and what they're looking like, where we, as opposed to me going against what I see versus what they're feeling like. So if we go into this next slide, this is our start of the practice. And yesterday, this is video from yesterday, and I got some video today. I think we only had an hour after Kevin got there from work. Ben theoretically has a job, and Colton is a free agent on the job market right now. So this is us. So after every call, now I'm usually not videotaping this, but this is just for this webinar. Colton's pretty happy that we videotaped that one for you. And then why I move it, so I move it about an inch or so every time, just so we're not burning in a path on the rock. So this is the first 16 rocks of practice. Yeah. Yeah, and you can Ben's very humble and loving life. But again, he's working. It's funny. Ben right now has always had a great outturn and is now working on that and loving his intern more. But that becomes a full conversation with us, especially today. Making sure that what he's trying to look at. So there's an angle of attack we're talking about in terms of how he's coming towards the brush, but then also a release mechanism. But I need them to be sliding through the cones. So if we go back to the start of that video, if you look at how much room there is as that rock comes through the cones, it's pretty tight. And again, it's meant to be, but I also need them. Colton can't slide, as you can see, because he's got his brush through the on the ground, but the other guys have to. And I want to be able to, if Colton can't slide, I want to be on the understanding that he could have went through with his body, and we can't allow them not to do that. So a curling delivery needs to be straight. So if they're drifting or they're manipulating the rock to get through, I'd rather them slide straight into the narrow cone and know that their body was dead straight behind the rock than allowing them the artistic impression marks to get that rock through. So we have to hammer that into them. So yesterday, this was just 16 rocks. All three guys were there at the start of practice. So it's pretty easy. Today, Kevin was late, so we went 32 rocks so he could get some feedback. But they know this is part of practice. If I'm not there, this is how they'll start, is getting this feedback for themselves. So again, once we finish this, the objective information that the athlete's now received is that his setup is hitting the brush. No matter where we move that, it's all about hitting the brush and set up in the hack. Because where we can then go back to it in the game is if he makes a mistake, he has the confidence, he or she has the confidence that they don't have to change anything. And I want them, because we're not 100% on accuracy yet in curling. So when they make the mistake, I just want them to chalk it up to mistake and go back to what they've been practicing and set up the same. Then the next part, so you've probably seen these in the on the ice. They're across Canada now, it seems, but it's a pretty inexpensive piece of setup. So it's just a 1-inch PVC pipe with I've made this little broom head out of just foam core or plastic core poster stuff that we had in the club, and then it just flaps there. So with the understanding, so the collective understanding of what we're trying to achieve here is I put this flapper, the broom target that they're using, at the break point on this ice condition. So we're about halfway down the sheet here. So and their understanding is through release, that rock from their hand to that red target should not curl. So they're allowed to be on the brush or slightly wide, but they can't be narrow. They can also, that rock can also not be curling through there. It can also not be flowing backwards through there. So we get to see a lot of release. And then if I see some, the first question I'll ask is what'd you see? So if and hopefully it matches up, right? So if we see something curling, that might be the fact that they were just light or heavy. But a lot of times, they're throwing it pretty good today, or yesterday that was. And again, if we look at where this rock is, that's ideal in their world. So if we're going to an ice condition that curls a fair bit, they can be, with draw weight especially, on the brush or slightly wide, and they're going to make a ton of shots. And this is something, so to the lady that was coaching the ladies over 50, this is something we need those curlers to understand, is that they don't have to be perfect. When I hang out with this level curler, where you find our elite curlers understand is where they have the margin of error and where they can be on. They're not trying to be perfect. They're just trying to be on the right side of good, knowing that the ice and their sweepers can help them make their shots. So many times we have inexperienced curlers or developing curlers who are trying to be so accurate that they manipulate that rock in that last 3 feet to hit the brush. And I'm using my hands in quotations, forgetting you guys can't see me right now. But getting them to understand that they don't have to hit the brush with the release, they just have to release it properly. So if they're an inch inside, it's not ideal, but I can deal with it as a skip better with the release. I know what's happening as opposed to them trying to fix it in that last. So I'll never be happy with the release that I see. It looks like they're trying to fix their line of delivery with it. The fault that I want these curlers to have, if they ever have one, is it's simply misaligned. So they have a dead straight slide going slightly wide or slightly narrow with a great release. And that happens every once in a while. And then we get the video out and just show them. So they're coming out dead straight, but they're just wide. So they have to readjust how they're aiming, if you can call it that, in their mind. And sometimes it's just a spot. So if you watch, that's only going to be like perfect, says Ben. Meanwhile, yeah. Anyway, he threw his top house draw to the back house, which is not ideal. And what you're hearing from me is I'm not giving them the time. I have a time on my clock. I think he was about 13 and a half there, and he went to the back house. I'm hoping in a perfect world, and these guys do fall asleep every once during practice, that he's now just give Colton a couple seconds of information about, okay, I thought I threw 14, but it went to the back house. So I'm thinking it's 14 and a half, 15 to the top house. So Colton, as you saw there, gets feedback that he's on the exact same line as Ben. So he's hit the brush, he's released it properly, and there we go. Now I give him a time because we failed. So Ben, we make fun of his old problems. We won't talk about that. Sorry, Sherry. But it's because he's in Alberta now. So so pausing that, because the frustration here, and we can have fun with it, is that we've had 2 shots now, and we've failed at number 1, and that's fine. We're allowed to make that mistake at lead rocks, but then what we have to do with that feed forward mechanism is make that next shot better, and we actually made it worse. So then hopefully what's happening down here on sheet 8 right now is a conversation about weight and release. So they know it's always curling there, but it's not usually this fast. So it got a little warmer in Alberta the last couple of days, and then ice just gets a little bit faster, in our club at least, when it gets a little warmer. And then Kevin successfully threw it. I think just back tee line that one. I didn't get the end of the video there. So that's the start. So with the three guys there, we got a few shots, but yesterday we didn't have as much time as we had today. So we had in-turn, out-turn for that one on the center line, and then in-turn, out-turn coming back, going towards the center. And I have an example of that coming up. So the discussion there, and feel free to jump in on the text box if you want, because I can look at that easier than the audio, is why are the cones of flapper great examples of deliberate practice? And again, if we go back to the definition, right, involving stepping outside your comfort zone, going beyond your current abilities, and getting also making sure that we've achieved them. That's my biggest one, is making sure they've achieved them. So we want to get feedback with deliberate practice. These guys are really, really good. So what I don't want them to do is just throw all the shots so that they feel they're really, really good at them. I want them to know going into provincials and the skins game, and we can't forget that the skins game will probably pay their mortgage for half a year, if not the whole year if they win it. Is that they're really confident how they're throwing and that they're doing what they should do. They can't let up. So what you won't hear is that discussion after those first three rocks and going down and just acknowledging that we actually need to step it up. If John Dunn, their sports psychologist, with him, he might have walked off the ice at this point after they screwed a couple up. So if we get back to the cones and flapper, what I like about this drill and this drill is they get feedback both on line of delivery, release mechanism, and timing. So I'll have the hog-to-hog timers, so does Ben, and acknowledge if they're actually achieving those three qualities or quantitative measures. So if they hit the brush here in the cones, they're allowed to be on the brush slightly wide. Here with the flapper, it's all about that release mechanism, making sure that the first half of that sheet is straight, and then the break point can come after that. And then they're also getting on those shots, feedback on hog-to-hog times and making sure that they're throwing at top house. The worst thing they can do right now with a team like this, with sweeping that they have, is throw a perfect tee line. So we're always trying to throw just nibbling on the top 12 foot in a perfect world. And the same thing if there's rocks that are unswept and shots that are unswept, if we tick guards and just miss doubles, that's ideal in a practice when it's not unswept. And we have to get there with athletes. Because what we want to understand is they don't have to throw it perfect. I don't want young players getting the idea that they can throw it to the tee line or to the button, make perfect freezes, and then not recognize how that impacts their game. Because we have our sweepers, we all love them and bless them, but they want to sweep. So if we throw a perfect tee line at them, they're apt to sweep it for 4, 5, 6 feet. And we need to acknowledge it also changes how that rock travels. So getting them to understand that in practice, let's move that button up 6 feet, and then they're just aiming at the top house. So we can bring sweeping into it. Now, some of those other teams, if we don't have sweeping, which are some of my club-based teams, you know what? They have to be a little more perfect. So they need to move that button back into the house a little bit. And if they have no sweeping, because their club team is just not good at all, then they have to be right to the button. But with those, we have a lot of competitive coaches on here. Really talking to your teams about where they're aiming for in terms of that weight control is extremely important. And understanding, getting them the idea that if they're ticking guards and hack weight hits, and it's just the coach and the athlete out, or it's just the athlete by themselves, a little tick on that guard is really, really good feedback. And getting them understanding about what side of good they can be on. If they hit a quarter rock in that hack weight hit that they're getting by doing it by themselves, then that's not good feedback. But the nice thing about the cones and the flappers, they can watch that line. I can watch the same line and be on the same page about if things are, if they floated something or if it's curling a little bit more. So if we go into exercises and drills, and I'm not going to give too many drill examples on here, I will give you a setup on practice. But the basic is giving your role is to assign, and I say that because I know you're not with your team all the time. So working with them that they have these exercises and drills to improve in a particular area. Tons of stats programs out right now. So we know that you can get some objective data from games and say this is the areas we need to work on. But then we need to prove that they're working on them. And then if they can score those drills, it's even better. So these drills have to be a result of game observation or analysis that identify a weakness that we have to address. And then getting them to embrace addressing it. Right? If we can maintain our strengths and always improve our weaknesses, you're going to have a juggernaut at the end of the year. But so many people, like the first video we saw, go out and they throw a lot of rocks. I kind of feel good about it. Like if you look at Jack, I can't say his name. If you look at his practice, he had all his rocks in the rings. Right? It was really good. His draw was great. He has no idea if his intern's soft or he's hitting the broom once. And this is the guy who practices probably once a day. And then those 2 points up there is the definition that I want you to work with. Is your drill, your job, or your role in this deliberate practice is assigning and creating those drills that identify a weakness. So much so that the athlete and the coach, if they're both there, can see that the weakness has been addressed. It might not be fixed, but the cool thing about creating these drills is that if it isn't fixed, the athlete looks to you and says, okay, my rock's still curling, so maybe he hasn't soft intern, right? So Kevin, a couple years ago, his out turn was just finishing. We were getting through the flapper like his teammates at that time, but we were getting an extra half a rock of finish on it. So at that point, he's like, okay, so how to fix it? Perfect. Now the door is wide open for the coach. And then what we identified there is just adding half a rotation to that out turn. And then that identical rock path was created for him and his teammates. And that's a key question. How do we identify weaknesses? And I challenge you to create use stats programs. So there's just a new one that came out on I can't give you the name, but came out in the iPhone that I saw around Christmas time. What I do, honestly, if I don't have my phone, if I'm scouting teams, the World Championships and stuff, I just keep track of their misses. So I love the fact that they make things, but I want to take what I have in my notes on misses. So if I have an X and I'm simply a miss, and then beside that there's a quick note that is an intern, is an overcurl. And then I go back through those notes on that specific team and find all the X's. And then I do a quick written analysis about, okay, what am I seeing consistently? Then I go to the competition stats and see if it's popping up there. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times the volunteer statisticians, it's not going to be the same as our notes. And it's amazing if just through my hieroglyphics of X's and check marks, what you can find out about your team. If I have my iPad there, then I use the stats program that kind of gives me the same information. And again, I'm just looking at overcurl and undercurl. So that might, because I'm not on the ice, I'm just watching the game, I can't tell if they hit the broom or not. But I might find then, in certain shots, intern hack waiters or intern run backs, that there's a theme coming out. And again, we're kind of trying to pick on them if we can. With your team, you have the ability to assign a parent or do that yourself with the stats program, and that can come up day to day. Just make sure the parent isn't the one who's trying to make people look good. These stats numbers don't have to be shared with the team, but in reality, if we have a lot of U18 teams on here. If we have U18 teams playing 85%, they should be winning a lot of championships. So then it's having a common understanding of what 4-4 to 5-5, depending on the program you're using, what that is. But more importantly, we need to know how they missed the shot if they didn't make it. So if it was, if they hit a guard, and how we describe it, that's an undercurl, overcurl, and then we identify that after the game and ask the skip. The skip's going to give subjective information a little bit, but if we're on the same page, it can be a little objective if we trust his or her eye. So if we know that, if Kevin after a game or after an event, and we're practicing on Monday or Tuesday, and I'm asking about Colton, and Colton identifies, I'll ask Colton first, what do you think we need to work on? And he'll say, I'm not happy about my intern. I think I'm just floating it a bit. I'll instantly ask Kevin, and I'll usually ask him in front of him to see what he's seeing. because I want to make sure that it's just not a wide slide on Colton's behalf. And then we're kind of got all the information on the same page. And then we start seeing what that happens in practice. And if we need to get video out, we will. And again, with you saw how clear the video was with my iPhone. If we add a laser to that, you would see a ton of information with no app or software whatsoever. So practice planning. It doesn't have to be rocket science, as I say, thank goodness. And here's a sample of what we do a fair bit. And we'll make sure you get copies of the slideshow so you don't have to write it all down. But it's always cones and flapper to start. So I need to make sure there's a common theme of line of delivery and release. And that might be different. So we have a lot of teams going off to regionals coming up. If we know the ice condition is straight and fast, then we will turn it down. So, for example, Cooey's team last year before the trials, Jamie Brass is making the ice. Jamie has a much different ice condition based on the sandpaper that he uses than Mark Schierick. So what we did was before we had Jamie come in, we actually had a straighter set of rocks that we use for hits, because Jamie's ice notoriously, and not bad, will run a little bit straighter for hits. So we kept a set of rocks unpapered for a few weeks before, and then we had another set of rocks that we had for draws. I know that's a little bit pie in the sky for some clubs, but again, going to a straighter club, we would then work with the teams to just throw a little bit softer, right? So a lot of young people, they can relate soft the number of rotations. So if we're normally throwing 3, we identify that we know it's going to be straight there, as opposed to hating the ice. I need to go into the club with the team loving the ice, but we've already identified how we're going to deal with it. So then working with them. Anyway, so that's cones and flapper, always with the flapper looking at release mechanism. Then we move into, I use the term hashtag run broom, which is a term we came up with Casey Scheidegger's team when we started working together. And that's just because they use hashtags all the time. I'm 43 and I kind of get hashtags, but working with them, the idea is that in this world of competitive curling, we actually have to have one broom. So if we put the broom down for an intern draw on the far side, in an ideal world, that all 4 of those rocks will end up in the same spot. So we just call it one broom shots. So there's 2 sweepers, skip hole in the brush. Remember the first sort of 16, 32, 64 rocks, depending on what we've set up, has been the skip is down at the other end with the players. And I would challenge you to try to do as much as you can. We put them on their own so much, but getting them involved in those weight discussions, release discussions, and just having a little bit of fun as opposed to always being the person down at the far end holding the brush. So then we get into the one broom stuff where the lead, now if you've looked here, the lead shots are slightly different. So they always go draw, guard, freeze, hack, weight, hit, and roll to start this drill. And then it's in turn first. Basically, because as much as Ben thinks he's a run back artist, we don't need him to learn how to do run backs. And then the second, third, and fourth, I'm going to do the same freeze or draw in reality as the lead, the same hack, weight, hit, and roll, and then the second, third, and fourth or skip all get the same double and the same run back. Again, in a perfect scenario, we're putting the broom in the same spot for each of those athletes. Now, to those coaches getting ready for regionals, it's at this point a year that you can, if someone's rock is curling more, don't try to fix it. So if we're not having one broom right now, it's okay to say, so what do we have? And as long as we're on the same page with the athlete and the skip that they're putting the broom down, we can have those slight changes per athlete, but I don't want to give up on getting that one broom. Like, we need to get them there at some point, but the week before regional is not the time to make a technical change. We love all of our athletes the week before a competition, a major competition. I don't love Team Cooey the week before Grand Slam in October. But this week, we're making minimal technical changes, if any, and it's just feedback. So if they're not doing what they know they can do, we point that out. If someone's intern's curling an extra half rotate or an extra half a rock and has been doing that for the last 3 weeks, we haven't been able to fix it, we're going to embrace it at this point, and we're simply going to take more ice. Once provincials, Briar, whatever might be done, we'll address it probably in end of March, start of April. going into the end of the season, but also going into next season, but never give up on it. And if you feel the need to give up, that means just call someone else and send some video and get some feedback there. So again, so we do that, that 16 rocks with the intern, and that's just one side. So that's just intern going to the center. We repeat for the outturn, and what I forgot to put down there, on the way back, as I can put this in, repeat for inside out, right? So now that's 4 ends of curling right there. But the cool thing about it is if we feed forward throughout, so the lead's always throwing first. And what I've talked about the sweeping debrief is I want the sweepers to debrief their sweeping on how they did, especially for those freezes. The hack, weight, hit, and roll doubles and runbacks really aren't that big a deal for them because they're listening to the feedback from the skipper, the third. If we do these 4 ends, we've got a ton of feedback, right? And if someone's working on something, they're going to get a ton of objective feedback, seeing their rock get to the right spot. And we need to create, and then we can get into end scenarios if we want to, and strategy discussions. But if you think about what we've done here, we've done either between 6 ends of curling or 8 ends of curling with cone, flapper, depending on how much we do with that, and with intern, outturn, going inside out and center in. And now we're ready to go. If there's individual practice, we can pull these shots out for the individual to get them working on it. Now, without the sweeper, it's a little bit differently. So I would really focus, if it's an individual practice, I focus a little bit more on the cones and the flapper with them. And then if they have the ability to use digital timers, getting that feedback is imperative in my mind. So there's a couple Rock Hawk out of Edmonton. So Rock and the Bird Hawk is a simple setup with Bluetooth that uses iPhones and or an iPad as a display. It's a great mechanism. You can do a few things. If you use one Rock Hawk, you can just get a speed of the rock, which I actually really like, and that's how we match rocks at Worlds and Olympics these days. It's with a set of Rock Hawks just outside the hog line, but you can also get 2 of those pieces of hardware and do traditional hog-to-hog times. Brower timing out of the States is definitely a way more expensive system, but simple setup too. So those are always off on the side of the club, and you'll see athletes using those a lot more when they're done. Now this is the feedback there, just what I said, because I forgot I had the slide already written up. What we've done with the setup of the bottom bullet there, and I want to jump right there because I already covered the other stuff, is objective data and collective understanding on how the rock travels will allow them to self-identify their faults. And that's key, right? We need these athletes to understand when they've missed, and more importantly, how and why they missed that shot. So if they let it go soft and they took the guard, they got to recognize right away that happened. Rather than waiting for the answer to the most frustrating question is curling, which is how did I do? And no question in a practice is going to make me, identify that probably I didn't set up the practice right, but just be frustrated the athlete's not focusing on what they're actually doing. So getting them to understand that they can come to me and say, hey, instead of how did I do or what did you see, is it looked to me like that was curling before the flapper, but I think I threw it really good. Perfect. A little bit of a door open for me to say, I saw the same thing. You know, maybe we didn't get a hog-to-hog time. So the understanding about break point is if I throw it lighter, it's going to curl before the break point that we have identified with that target apparatus. So we need to get that objective data. If we have the objective data and he threw a perfect hog-to-hog time and it's still curling before, then I can just say, you know what? Appreciate that, but it curled way before. So you just make sure you go back and make sure you throw it positive. Again, I won't allow them in a game to come down their skip and say, you know, I don't know what happened or how'd I do. Is if the teammate's going to go down and get some information from the skip or feedback, I always push them to ask a question. You know, did you feel like I was a little outside on that one? Because I think I threw it great. Perfect. And it doesn't have to be cocky to say I threw it great, because actually that's our goal, is getting them to the point where they know they're throwing it great. And in practice, so this is today's practice. Get back here. Right. So again, providing that objective data, and I keep using objective and subjective data because I push the players to understand what that is. So their feelings are all well and good, but we need them to understand that we have to separate the real versus the feel, and make sure when they're practicing by themselves, they can say, Paul, I had a great practice today, and this is why. So every rock was traveling and hitting the brush or the target apparatus on the broom or slightly wide. Nothing was curling before, and everything ended up in the top of the house. That's a great practice. Imagine if that club curler had that feedback. So this one was today, and the boys are a little more on. I'm trying to be creative here, so I'm really good coaching today. I had my hog to hog times going, and we're just finishing the out turn. And again, I don't know where Kevin's ended up, but this is how we started. And it doesn't always look as good as this, but this should, even Ben says, there might even be a trough there, thinking that everything just ended up. But they're throwing it really, really good today. And this should be how things go, is that we get a little bit, in a perfect world, honestly, this is almost a mistake in terms of the drill. This wasn't our first time down this path. We just thrown the in turn, and now we're throwing the out turn. In my mind, we should have been a little bit better at this. And I would love to see this whole stack of rocks move up, even just starting at the top 8 foot and moving up into the top of the house. And then I'm moving those rocks too. Or the players will be. And that's how I know they're focusing in practice, is they watch where the rock goes and they start bouncing, moving rocks out of the way and putting them back because they're concerned about how their rocks are traveling. The only question mark we had at the first was this first one, the back yellow, that it was kind of under curling compared. That was Benzo, and he self-identified that he threw it just a little bit aggressively in terms of just an in-out pop, so it didn't finish the same position. But that's only half a rock, right? So we would identify it, but if it didn't happen again, and again, this would have been his next one right here, and it matched up with Colton and Flash. And again, if you look at that one broom scenario, or think back to that, that's kind of what we're getting to. So again, I think we've achieved, if they don't ask the question, how did I do? So if we set up practice properly and enough feedback, they're going to get that feedback and then ask those questions that get your input based on what they're seeing and feeling themselves. And again, and I say everyone leaves practice knowing that they've improved the team, and I hope they love that. I know I appreciate the practice where I know there's something that has been done and there's been objective data provided. Mindful of individual shots and how they're traveling. By the way, practice setup. And again, I stole this offline off this one setup, but you've seen the goal wheel before. And again, this is deliberate practice, really. It's not radically new information, but applied to practice, it kind of is. It's just getting that. So the coach I just put over top of the teacher substitute. This is from the education website, and getting that wheel going to make sure that we get the goal, whatever percentage or technical feedback we're trying to get. Practice with focus, but again, that's a little bit of the that onus is on the athletes themselves, but the onus is also on the kids, especially that U18, U20 group, to actually push them to focus. And I get you, and some days you're going to lose them. The feedback is really on our shoulders as coaches to make sure practice is set up that way, that they're getting consistent feedback, and then assess the limits. I wouldn't ever tell kids at any age that they have limits, but getting into it kind of gets into that possibility or the situation where they're doing certain things with the broom. So not that there's a limit, but there might be a little bit of a slight change needed for an athlete. And then that wheel keeps on going throughout their season. Well, it goes out throughout their life as an athlete. And in our sport, as we see here in our audience, that can be from 10 years old to 7 years old. Things to think of, and I'm not going to dictate practice to play ratio, but I would challenge you to be cautious on how much your athletes are playing. I was at a Riette game where Kevin Cooey's daughter was playing my daughter, and I was in the box with Kevin's wife, Carla, doing some volunteer hours, and we were just talking about that. And And her big concern is that if her ringette playing daughter curls more, they're playing every weekend. She's like, Paul, like I can't imagine at that age. She goes, if my oldest daughter starts curling, my youngest daughter is going to have to quit ringette because of course Kevin plays every weekend himself, and they'd be traveling all the place. So, and I cautioned her and really said, find the team that gets the fact that you don't have to play that much. It's attractive and there's money and prizes even at junior age. But we need to set up the situation where if our top athletes in the sport identify that they need training camps and practice weekends, that's okay for our athletes that are U21, U18, U15. I would say 1 to 2 bonspiels a month would probably be maximum in an ideal world. But I know it's hard to get those parents off the gravy train that is let's keep traveling and get all these points and money and so on. Anyway, just a food for thought. And games are not the best teacher. Even though we feel the need to get all of our data from games, if we set up practice, we can start getting that feedback from practice too. So again, just the challenging on some of the parenting. From my view, the game should be the reflection of what they already know from practice. So after that game, and we get some stats from our fantastic coach, we should see some nodding from the athletes. Like, that's how I felt this week. And, my intern's always just a slightly better this week than my out, and whatever it might be. But it would be great if that games were reflective of practice versus practice being dictated by the gameplay. A couple points. I know we're running out of time here, but making sure that we worked on weaknesses with identified goals. And again, as the year goes forward, turn up the degree of difficulty. It's not that we don't want these athletes feeling good about themselves. We want them always improving. And again, that degree of difficulty and cranking that up is going to keep that focus on it as opposed to being the monotonous of those drills. Good enough is not good enough. And again, we say it all the time. Sometimes we get frustrated. Sometimes we run out of time. And we're like, that's fine. And we'll just move forward. Challenge yourself. There's always an extra sheet sometimes. And stepping off with one athlete to fix something is going to be really important sometimes. Repetition is key in my books. So getting those shots that we do a lot and doing them well. And then don't do it until the athlete gets it right. Do it until they can't get it wrong. And get them to buy into that, because that's a huge difference in thinking. So many times you're like, yes, that's it. And then we're like, high fives, and off the sheet we go. You know what I do? Go to a different shot and then come back to it. Okay, let's see that out-turn run back again. That used to be setting all year and you just made it. Do it again. And if we've really connected the dots, they do it perfectly again. Find time to work for the team and the individual, and that should have been underlined. Plans should be made for both and reflect team goals. If we practice or we plan properly, the feedback's going to be coming from everywhere, from the drills, how we did them and scored them, from the coach, from the athlete themselves, and from the team. And then more importantly, for these developing athletes, all these U18, even this over 50 team, don't recreate the wheel. So if we're trying to talk about sweeping and so on, let's not have our own U18 special sweeping style that no team on TV is doing. We have some phenomenal teams on TV that with microphones and just watching them play, they're going to tell you exactly how they do things without even thinking they're sharing secrets. So I use that line all the time. You know what? Until you win the world championships and stuff, we want to put our own little spin on things. Let's just do what we see all these other great teams do. So if we want to pick Gushu and Holman or whoever we think, Hasselberg out of Sweden seems to be winning everything these days, then steal it, right? Our sport, because of microphones and because it's on TV so much, we get to see so much from these teams and athletes, and they can't hide it. So whether that's a sweeping thing, Rachel's team has a little bit of a release thing that they do. So find out and say, figure out, can we do that? And why would they be doing it? What is it getting them that we don't have? And again, just steal that plan that they have. I am 3 minutes for any questions that people might have.
We have the line for a little while, Paul, so we do have time for questions.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm going to unmute everybody now, and we'll take questions. Thank you. Okay, any questions for Paul? Paul, I'm glad you brought up that the flapper. It is so easy to create, like it's so easy to build, and it's such an effective tool.
Yeah, and if anyone needs plans for it, ever let me know. We have a whole bunch of that poster board at the Glamco that I can usually send some people. Cause it's not, it's just plastic stuff you can get at Staples. It can be foam core too, or it can just simply be cardboard. And then our hinge is pretty creatively done with duct tape. And it falls off every once in a while, but that seems to be the best stuff for that. And then it just for travel, that thing's just velcroed onto the pipe. So we can pack it up into a broom bag if anyone needs it. Yeah, if anyone needs the plans or the dimensions, just let me know. It gets smaller as the year goes on.
Yeah, I used foam from Walmart, craft foam, and at first I was gluing it together, and then I realized it was a peel-off backing, and you could just stick it together.
Perfect. Nice.
So, are there any questions or comments or any experiences?
Hi, Paul. It's Rob speaking.
Hey, Rob. How are you?
Oh, I'm well, thank you. We use a similar tool to your flapper where it's a little bit higher and it hangs your ribbon down so that we use that near the hog line. So when the player delivers the stone, they can slide underneath it. What are your thoughts on using that at the hog line versus at the breaking point?
Well, the fact that you can slide underneath it's good. What I like about having you could still use that ribbon at the break point. What we have to understand is that anything at the hog line is simply about line of delivery, right? So that's all about their setup hitting the brush. We're not going to get any feedback about release. And even at that U15 age, a lot of those kids are really, really good about sliding straight. And now we have to get into about what's happening that last 3 feet of their delivery. So getting them to understand how that rock's supposed to travel, and then actually paying attention to it. So with that target at that break point, and I'll just say halfway down the sheet, because we will move that target too. So if Colton Flash, for example, is throwing peel weight at me, you'll see that target's inside the far hog line, right? So what it does also is get them to start thinking about break point and what weight does to that. And that also helps them with that imagery of that shot when they're getting ready in a game about how that rock's supposed to travel. And if they watch, so if I'm throwing behind Colton and he lets a laser beam go from hog to hog line, and I see no curl whatsoever, and I jump in and then I see mine curl half a rock by the hog line, I instantly understand that my release isn't the same as his. So I love having something at that break point, but again, it does take a while to get the team to understand what we're trying to achieve and what that rock pass goes to. So I think there's time and place for both. Having that apparatus at the hog line, but I would say as they get better, we need to have it at the break point as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Paul. I think this has been really informative, and I'm glad that you've shared your contact information. I will be sending this out to everybody once the recording is ready, and you'll have access not just to Paul's email, but to his cell phone information as well. So thank you, Paul. It's been an amazing webinar, very, very practical and very useful. So I really appreciate you taking the time to work with us.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone. And again, I don't put the email out there for no one to use it. So if you have any questions and so on, feel free to send those in. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thanks, everybody. Watch for the next webinar.